Hello everyone, DaveDev here. Welcome to this video. In today's video, we will take a look at logical operators as well as comparison operators and how to use them in combination with if-else statements to execute different parts of our code depending on conditions. What are operators? Operators are a way of performing operations on specific variables or values. As we saw in our Math for PHP lesson, we use math operators to perform math operations such as adding, subtracting, or multiplying by using the math operator symbols like plus and minus. Today we will take a look at other type of operators called logical operators and comparison operators. Comparison operators are one of the main ways of comparing two values. The result of this operation will always return a boolean with true if the comparison condition applies or false if it doesn't. Let's take a look at the different types of comparison operators that we can use. The first one is the equal operator. This operator will return true if the first value is equal to the second value. As you can see here, we have value 1, which is 1, and value 2, which is also 1. And the return of this operator is a boolean with the value true. The opposite of this is not equal, which will return true if the first value is different from the second one. Given the same values, 1 and 1, the operation will return false because the two values are equal. There's a similar operator for the equal operator called identical operator, with the main difference that it will return true if the two values are the same, as well as if the values are of the same data type. As we can see here, the first value is an integer with the value 1, but the second value is a numeric string with the value 1, which in the previous equal operator it would return true, but in this one it returns false because the data type of the two variables are different. There's the opposite one, which is not identical, which will return the opposite of the previous one, which is true in this case, because the values are the same value but not the same data type. The next one is greater than, which will return true if the first value is greater than the second value. As we can see here, the first value is 1 and the second value is 2, and the operator returns false, meaning that the first value is lower than the second value. And then the opposite is lesser than, which will return true if the first value is lesser than the second value. It returns true in this case because 1 is lesser than 2. Now we have a combination of equal and greater and lesser, which is handy when you want to compare if the value is equal or greater, or if it's equal or lesser. The first one will compare if the first value is greater than the second value or equal to the second value. As we can see here, the two values are 1, meaning that it is not greater, but it is equal. And then the opposite is lesser than or equal, which will return true if the first value is less or equal to the second value, which in this case is also true because it's not less, but it is equal to the first value. Now we will take a look at logical operators. A logical operator is mostly used to combine comparison operators into one result, or also to combine two booleans into one. This operator will also return a boolean with the values true or false at the end of the operation. This is very handy when you have multiple comparisons to do at the same time. Let's take a look. The first operator is the AND operator, which will return true if both booleans or operations are true. This can be represented as the two ampersand symbols or as the AND keyword. So we can take a look in this example. The first value is true, however the second value is false, meaning that the AND operator will return false, because one value is different from the other one. Now, the OR operator will return true when at least one of the booleans or operations is true. This can be represented by the OR keyword or by the two vertical sign symbols. As we can see in this example, the first value is true, however the second value is false. But because we are using an OR operator, it will return true because the first one was true. It doesn't need the both values to be true to return true. Another variant is the XOR operator. This will return true if only one of the booleans or operations are true, but it will not return true if both are true. As we can see here, the first value is true and the second value is false, and the result of the XOR operation is true. If both values would be false or both values would be true, the resulting of this operation would be false. And the last of the logical operator is the NOT. This will basically invert the value of the boolean or the operation. It can be represented as the exclamation mark before the operation. As we can see, the original value of the operation was true, but we applied the NOT operator and it inverted the value, so the resulting value is false. Now that we have some understanding on comparison and logical operators, let's see how we can use them for adding some logic into our code. Let's say that we only want to execute a part of our code when one of those conditions are true. We can do that by using an if statement, just like the following. We will specify the if keyword, and then inside of the parentheses, we will specify the condition that we want to check. And then inside of the curly brackets, we will specify the code that will execute if the condition is valid. As we can see, the condition was true, and because of that, the code inside of the curly brackets got executed. Let's make a more specific example so you can understand this a little bit better. Let's say that we have a bag of fruit that can only contain up to 5 pieces of fruit, and we currently have 4 fruits already inside of that bag. We would like to check if the bag is full before adding a new fruit to it. Let's say how we can do that. First, we will specify the maximum capacity of the bag, which is going to be 5. Then we will specify the current capacity, which is 4 at the moment. Now, we want to add a new fruit to the bag. However, we will need to check first if the bag is full or not. To do that, we will simply use the if statement, and we will check if the current capacity is lesser than the max capacity. And if so, we will specify the code that we want to execute, which is adding a new fruit to the bag. The if statement has checked if the current capacity is smaller than the maximum capacity, which in the first case it is true because the current capacity at the beginning was 4. But what if we execute this code once again? As you can see, it prints the current bag capacity to be 5, but it doesn't execute this again because this condition has failed. Now let's add a warning message if the bag is full. We could add another if statement with the opposite comparison operator to check if the bag is full. However, there is a more handy way when you use if statements. The else keyword can be used for when we want to execute code when the condition is not valid, just by placing it at the end of the if statement. As you can see, it still has to use the curly brackets, but we don't need to specify a condition here, because this will execute only when this condition has failed. And as you can see, it's saying that the bag is full and it couldn't add items to it. Now there is a third variation if you would like to compare multiple conditions on the same if statement. By adding the if-else statement, it will check the condition when the first if statement has failed, but after the else statement. So let's add here. What this will do basically is check if the first condition failed, it will check the else if condition, and then if the else if condition failed, it will go to the else. And as you can see, nothing changed because the current capacity is equal to the max capacity. But if we were to add another one here, it goes to the else because this condition also failed. So the bag is over its capacity. One thing to note with the else if statement is that you can add as many as you want and it would work in a chain. So if the first if statement fails, it will go to the next else if statement. But if the next else if statement fails, it will go to the next one and then the next one and then the next one. And if nothing else was valid, then it will go to the else. However, when you add many else if statements, the code starts to get very ugly and unreadable. So there's another way of doing this when you have to compare a lot of cases. And this is the switch. So a switch statement is basically a way of performing multiple actions based in different condition results. It is very similar to writing a group of if-else statements and compare the values with equal operators. And this is how it's written. In here, we specify the switch keyword, and inside of the parentheses, we specify the value to check. It is not a condition, but the value of the thing that we want to check. And then the condition, it can only be equal, meaning that each case, it's a possible value that the parameter or value that it's inside of the parentheses can have. For example, because we are checking for integers, the values inside of the cases need to be all as well integers. So in this case, we are checking if the value is 1, and then we would execute this code at the end. It is very important to specify the break keyword at the end of the code execution, because if not, it will jump onto the next case and execute it, and then go to the default and execute it. As long as you have finished your logic for that particular case, you will have to break the code, and then it will jump out and continue with the program. And I forgot to mention that the default case will be called when none of the previous cases are being called. In this case, when the case 1 and case 2 are not valid, it will execute the default one. So let's say that the value to check is 3. It will go to the default because there is no other case that is covering that value. Let's make a case scenario that it's more understandable for us. Let's say that we want to execute a specific code depending on the type of animal that we were given by comparing the names. We could definitely do this with if-else statements and comparing all the string values over and over. But as we said before, when there are many comparisons to make, it's cleaner to just use a switch statement. And here it is. We have a switch statement with a couple of animal types that we want to check. And we were given the animal type dog. Now we specify the animal type as the parameter of the switch statement, and it will compare every case that we have specified in the statement and try to look for the actual that we want to use. And if none of the above cases are valid, it will go to the default case. You can see it returns this is a dog, meaning that it has executed the case where the value is dog. Something to note is that the switch statements will work with numeric data as well as string values. There are times when we would just want to check if a condition is valid for a value and then assign the same value to the parameter. Thankfully, there's a shortcut for that. So as we can see here, we are assigning the value of the variable given a condition, meaning that when this condition is true, it will assign this value to this variable. However, when this condition is false, it will assign this value to this variable. Now it's time for an exercise. Let's imagine that we are making a very simple game inventory where you can store items as well as remove them. The inventory has a maximum capacity of 10 items. However, there are certain items that can have a smaller capacity, such as potions, which there can only be up to 5, and keys, which there can only be up to 2. What we want to do in this exercise is to add items to the inventory, and our little program should check if the inventory is full and if the potions and keys capacity are already full. And if that is the case, show a warning error. I am expecting you to use the if-else statements as well as switch statements and comparison operators. Here is a little help for making the exercise. As you can see here, we have already defined the current amount of keys, the max amount of keys that we can take, the current amount of potions, and the max amount of potions. And also the max inventory capacity and the current inventory capacity, which is the sum of the current amount of keys and the current amount of potions. Now, let's imagine that the user is giving you the item type potion, and then you will have to check, given that type, if we can add the item to the inventory. And then the same case, but with key. And you can write your code here to see if the item can be added to the inventory or if we should show a warning message. I will explain the solution to the problem in a couple of seconds. If you want to give it a try before I do, please pause the video now and come back when you have it, or if you got stuck during the exercise. Okay, so we are going to solve the problem. The first thing that we would need to do is to check if the inventory is already full before adding anything. So if that is the case, we will continue the execution, but if not, we will show a warning message with the else statement. Now we need to check if the inventory has a space for that particular item type. This will compare the string to the cases that I specify here. And for the default case, because it's not of the limited item type, we can't just add it to the current inventory capacity. Now for the potion, we need to check first if the amount of potions that we already have in our inventory, it's higher than the maximum capacity or it's not. And if that's the case, we will increase the current potions and add one more to the current inventory capacity as well. But if this is not the case, then we will show a warning. And as we said, we need to do the same for the item type keys. And there you go. Let's give it a try. Okay, potion added to the inventory. Now we want to check if we can add a new key to the inventory as well. So let's just copy and paste. It says item added to the inventory. Oh, I put the wrong key here in the case. There you go. It says you cannot take more keys. And this is the end of today's lesson. In the next video, we will take a look at how to use loops to execute the same code multiple times, as well as how to iterate through array elements. Thank you for staying until the end. Please subscribe to the channel and give a like if you like the content, and let me know in the comment section if you have any questions or suggestions. See you on the next video.